Okay, so get this. We're diving into something that's pretty hot right now. The impact of international students in Canada. All those requests we got, well,
Yeah.
you sent us a ton of stuff on it. Government reports and academic papers, even some market analysis. We're going to try to break it all down.
Right. And it's interesting because, we hear about the cultural stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
Or their contribution to academics.
Hmm.
But the economic side of this is massive. And
Hmm.
people don't always think about it.
No, they really don't. And you know what blew me away?
What's that?
Just in 2022, international students added $37.3 billion
Wow.
to the Canadian economy. Like, think about that for a sec. It's more than like the whole Canadian forestry industry.
Yeah, and that's not even everything. Like
Well,
when you think about it, the housing and the groceries and transportation, all of it, it means their impact on Canada's GDP is even bigger.
right.
Like $30.9 billion,
Yeah.
which is, a 1.2% increase.
Yeah, that's a lot. So really, just walking around any Canadian city, grabbing a coffee, whatever, you're probably seeing that money in action.
It's everywhere, yeah. And this isn't just a new thing either. Like if you look back over the last few decades, the numbers have gone way up. Like way, way up.
Give me some numbers.
Okay, so back in 2000, just over 122,000 students had study permits.
Okay.
But by 2022, that number jumped to over 807,000.
Wow.
So it's grown like more than 6 times.
So Canada's turning into like a student magnet.
It is.
But where are they all coming from and where in Canada are they going?
So Ontario's still the top spot, but you want to know something really surprising?
Yeah.
Prince Edward Island had the biggest jump, like percentage-wise,
Oh, wow.
over 1,800%. So even the smaller provinces are seeing more students.
PEI. Huh. Interesting. So the students themselves, like what countries are sending the most students to Canada?
Well, India's a big one. In 2022, their student numbers went up by 47%. Yeah. And then the Philippines, Hong Kong, Nigeria, and Colombia are all sending a lot more students too. It's like the global middle class is growing, and they want to study abroad.
And they like what they see here.
Yeah, I mean, Canada's known for being safe, tolerant, and having great schools.
Yeah, for sure. But it's not just about the money, though, right? They're bringing in different perspectives, making our communities richer,
Yeah,
not just economically.
right, exactly. Think about the research they do or how lively they make our campuses and cities. They bring their cultures with them. There's even research showing they help with innovation and making connections around the world. They do something called cultural diplomacy, too.
Cultural diplomacy, what's that? I mean, does having more international students really change how Canada works with other countries?
Oh, yeah. So basically, it's like building relationships between countries through cultural exchange. These students, they're like informal ambassadors. They help people understand Canada better, and that builds connections.
Okay, so like building bridges, basically.
Exactly. And then, of course, tons of them end up staying here after they graduate,
Mm,
which is great for our workforce and just, society in general.
makes sense. So we've got international students bringing in tons of money, boosting innovation, and even adding to our culture. It's all great, but I'm guessing there are downsides too?
There are some challenges for sure. Like,
Yeah.
we want to make sure it's a good experience for them and for Canada. So we have to be smart about it.
Yeah, challenges like you mentioned housing. I mean, with all these students coming here every year, it's got to be hard to find a place to live, right? Especially in the big cities.
Oh, it's a huge problem.
Yeah.
We've already got housing shortages all over Canada.
Right.
And then you add all these students on top of that. I mean, some of them end up in tiny apartments or they have to commute forever just to get to class. And some even struggle to find anything at all.
Oh, I bet that's tough. Like, you're trying to adjust to a new country and everything, and you can't even find a decent place to live. So, what can we do about this housing situation?
Well, we could try building more student housing, like purpose-built stuff.
Okay.
Maybe give developers some incentives to make affordable places that are safe and close to campus.
Makes sense.
And we have to make sure that landlords aren't taking advantage of students, with unfair rents or anything like that.
Right, especially since they might not know how things work here yet. And speaking of protecting students, we have to talk about recruitment.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, those agencies that help students apply to schools in Canada,
Mm,
we need to make sure they're not being ripped off or tricked.
absolutely. There have been some pretty bad cases. Like some agencies promise students they'll get a visa, for sure,
Oh, wow.
which is like totally a lie.
Mhm.
Or they charge these insane fees. They take advantage of these kids who just want to study here.
That's awful.
So Yeah, we need to keep a close eye on those agencies, set some clear rules for universities, and make sure students know where to go if they need help.
Yeah, like what if a student comes here and realizes they were lied to? What kind of support can they get?
Well, once they're here,
Yeah.
the universities have to step up and offer support, you know,
Mm-hmm.
things like tutoring, language classes,
Mm.
mental health services, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
They need to know that someone's looking out for them.
Right. So it's like we got to protect them before they get here and then support them once they're here.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's that new policy, the one about capping the number of study permits they give out.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. What's the deal with that?
It's controversial.
Yeah.
Some people think it's a good idea, like it'll slow things down and give everyone time to adjust.
Okay.
But others are worried it'll hurt the economy.
Mm.
Like we'll lose money and talented people.
Yeah, I can see both sides. So what are people worried about specifically? Like what kind of economic problems could it cause?
Well, universities and colleges make a lot of money from international students, right?
Tuition. Yeah.
And if there are fewer students, they'll have less money, and then they might have to cut programs or something, which isn't good for anyone. And then there are the local businesses, the restaurants and shops and all that. They depend on students spending money. And if there are fewer students, they'll lose business too. Plus, a lot of those students would have stayed in Canada after graduating, and they would have contributed to the economy, but now they might not be able to.
I see. So it's not just about the students themselves. It affects everyone.
Exactly. It's a ripple effect. There was actually this study about Atlantic Canada. It said that the cap could mean over 2,000 lost jobs and a $165 million hit to the GDP.
Wow, that's a lot. And that's just one region, so maybe this cap isn't such a great idea after all.
Yeah, it's complicated. We have to think about different parts of the country, the economy as a whole, and what students and communities need.
Hmm.
It's not as simple as just saying yes or no to more international students.
Definitely not. So, okay, we've talked about the amazing things international students bring to Canada. We've talked about the challenges. What's the bottom line here? Like, what should people be thinking about after listening to all this?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that these students are people, real people with their own stories.
Right.
And they add so much to Canada, to our economy, our culture, everything. They make our communities richer and more diverse.
It's really eye-opening, all this stuff about international students. I have to say, I didn't realize how big of a deal it was until we started this deep dive.
Yeah, people don't always see the whole picture. They see the students, of course,
Right.
but they don't always connect that to the economy, to our culture, to how Canada is seen in the world.
It's like a whole hidden world almost. And it feels like Canada's at a crossroads right now with all this, right?
Yeah.
We want these talented people from around the world, but we have to do it right.
Absolutely. It's a balancing act. We want the economic benefits, but it has to be good for the students and for Canadians who already live here.
So how do we do that? It sounds complicated.
It is. Like, how do we make sure everyone has a decent place to live and that students aren't being taken advantage of? And how do we make sure everyone feels welcome and like they belong here? Those are big questions.
And there's no easy answer.
Not really. But I think the important thing is to talk about it, to listen to what international students have to say, and to work together to find solutions that work for everyone.
That's a good point. So the next time our listeners, see a bunch of students hanging out or hear people speaking different languages at the store,
Yeah?
they should think about how those students are changing Canada, like in big ways.
And maybe they'll start thinking about the future, too. Like, what do they want Canada to look like? What role should international students play in that future?
That's to think about.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been pretty fascinating. And until next time, keep on learning.